George McGinness is the most talented man I've ever known.
George came from Westchester University. That was where he did his undergraduate work. He had a degree in physical education. And I considered him to be a true professional. He loved to teach. He was a teacher first and a coach second. And I got to appreciate that. The more I met him, he was very ethical, very honest, straightforward. He told you what he was thinking. You never had to worry about where George was coming from because he was coming from. And he brought his professionalism to the staff and was a very important part of the staff while he was at F&M.
People don't realize that George he's also in charge of intramurals. So when George took over football, he had football in the fall. As soon as football season was over, he had swimming, and then he had intramurals all that time. Of course, he also had diving, and diving is another sport in itself. And then when the women came along, George had men and women's swimming and diving for both groups.
When former swimmers come back to the campus, one of the first things they ask is, how is George? Or where's George? Can I go visit George? He was almost a father figure for most of the people that swam for him during his tenure at the college.
But I'll tell you, his students and his athletes loved him. George was tough on them, but he'd listen. He'd help them any way he could. He knew all the coaches in the league. And they all got along well.
There was a point in the 1970s where we didn't have money to hire a golf coach. We had so many part-time people and we were being pressed financially. I asked George to become the golf coach. He really had no background in golf. I didn't have a background in golf, but he took the job on and he did the best he could do with it. And you know, that was the way George was.
If I ever had a kid that was hurt, and we didn't have the facilities we have now, like in track and field or cross country, he said, Bill, anytime you have a kid, bring them up, because they put them in the water. A lot of exercises you can do in the water that you can't do running when you have bad knee or whatever, hip or fractures. So George always made time and room to put a kid somewhere in a swimming pool. Just a great, great guy.
George, thank you very much for the service that you gave to the college. Thank you for being my friend, for being a professional, and thank you for being part of the lives of all of the student athletes and other students that you touched with your professionalism while you were at Franklin and Marshall College. You know, the honors that you have been accorded are certainly deserving. And the fact that the college has named the pool in your name is probably the highest honor that you know, can be bestowed.
Coach, over my 7 years at Franklin and Marshall, I've met many, many people who swam for you and have came across you and knew you. And every single person, the stories that came from them were just absolutely incredible, and how you touched their lives and that you still had such an impact on their lives to this day.
That's nice.
And that just has made such an impression on me as a coach. And as the years, you know, came by, we started talking amongst, you know, my swimmers and some of the alums, and we thought, you know, there's some way that we wanted to bring all the alums back to F&M.
Oh.
And whether they swam for you, whether they swam for Coach Trites, whether they swam for myself, Coach O'Halloran, we thought that, then I thought, well, let's have a dinner at homecoming. It coincided with 80 years of men's swimming. This year is the 80th year of men's swimming at Franklin and Marshall,
right?
And it's the 35th year of women's swimming.
Yeah.
And we thought that was a great way to celebrate. And then, of course, you know, we wanted to celebrate the years that you were there because of the time, the energy, and just the impact that you made on the program there. So that was the idea behind all this.
I was in swimming from the time I started until I left. And I instituted the first women's team. And you know, at first I thought, I don't want to coach the women. But it turned out to be the most enjoyable thing I ever did. I have so many fond memories of the women and the men, you know. And that still stays with me. And the women were just wonderful. And we had so much fun. And I have a few stories I'm going to tell you about it when we get through here. But that's about the history of my F&M.
Not to do with F&M, but I've heard stories that you've, in your involvement in the community of Columbia. You want to touch on that a little bit, what you've done in this area?
I was a borough councilman for 36 years. Okay. It's the longest term of anybody who ever was on borough council. And then I went on the school board. I only spent 4 years there. My wife over there, I talked her into going, and she went for 16 years serving on the school, hating every minute of it. And I think by the time she might have cussed me out for even trying to get her involved. But those were hectic years, Bob. And many times I stood alone.
What were some of the rivals you had? You mentioned Lehigh as one of the teams you competed against. Like, we don't compete against Lehigh now. What were some of your big rivalries? What schools?
This is why I say Shilbert Barr was a great athletic director. I went to Shilbert, I said, Shilbert, look, I want you to schedule me any team you want in the whole United States. I said, I'm not only trying to train swimmers, but I want these boys and girls to have the experience of meeting good competition. So sure enough, he did. And so he had me with Navy, Army, Lehigh, Lafayette, all the major schools in the country. And I have a story about that. And if you have the time.
I'd like to hear your story.
Okay. We went up to Yale. And I had this one kid, Fitzpatrick. And he never won a point for me. But he never missed a practice. And I felt that that was a rewarding thing. To me, it was. So we came to the Yale trip. Have you ever been to Yale?
Yes.
A big oval?
Yeah, and the steep stands.
Yeah. So I said, Fitz, I'm going to take you along. Now I don't know whether I'm going to be able to swim you. I said, but we'll try. So before the meet, you have a session where you sit down and you make up the heats, you know. So I thought, well, I'll put Fitz in there. He had no business being in there. So I was sitting in the bleachers, and my team came out of the locker room. On the end of the team was Fitzpatrick. That's all right. But they gave him a Donegal haircut. And the most embarrassing thing, in front of all those people, he got up on that block. But what was even worse, the team, the man that he was swimming against was Craigie, a nationally known swimmer. He was right next door to him. So he had to swim, you know. Well, when the race was over, Fitzpatrick was still swimming about. He had a whole lake of the pool yet to go. The other guy was out drying off. But the embarrassing thing was that Donegal haircut. I'll never forget that as long as I live.
Now, 35 years of coaching swimming at F&M. You've got a million memories, I know that.
Yeah.
Give me two of your fondest memories of F&M. And it doesn't even have to be swimming. Your fondest memories, two of them.
All right. I can give you many. As a matter of fact, I wrote them down so I didn't forget them.
Great.
I'll try to briefly go through them. I gave you one, Fitzpatrick. I'll never forget him as long as he lives, and as long as I live. I'll never forget the incident. We had the Mid-Atlantic Championships at Elizabethtown this year. We held them at F&M, Elizabethtown, Swarthmore. So, we were down to the final wire, Bob, and I put a kid by the name of Eisenberg in the far lane. I hit him, like you would do. And while the two in the middle they were battling out to get first place, Eisenberg came along and crept up and just about touched. He did touch so bad. I got up on the diving board at the end of the race and I complained about the race, but no, they said, judges, it's final. But the thing that bothered me more than anything, Joe Verdure, did you ever hear him?
I've heard of the name, yeah.
He was an Olympic swimmer. He became the coach of LaSalle.
Okay.
And we swam LaSalle, and he'd kill us. And he began to take a dislike to me. And I don't know why, I never did anything to him. But anyhow, this day in the finals, I saw him edge over to one of the judges. He was a womanizer, and he was trying to make time with her. She was a judge. He had no business doing that, but he did. And Eisenberg touched it out, touched the other two out. There was a difference between winning the championship and taking second. And everybody in the pool saw the finish, and he judged that Eisenberg didn't make it. And I was so mad.
You already talked about the impact of the women, on the program and whatnot. Now, when the women came into the program, did you have all your meets? Were they together, men and women, or did the women have their own meet and the men? Okay.
I held my practices together, and I coached the men. We had diving.
Right.
So I had men and women swimming, men and women's diving, and I coached diving after the swimming team was done. So my wife suffered there because I'd never get home 9, 10 o'clock, But I didn't mind it. So I had a session. We only practiced an hour and a half.
Well, I want you to know that, again, the people that I talk to, the stories that they come back with about you are incredible, and that inspires me. That inspires me as a coach.
The greatest experiences, Charlie Bale, he couldn't swim worth a damn. But I took him along and we swam. He swam in Army against a guy by the name of Craigie. Charlie was still swimming when Craigie was out of the pool drying off. But you know, that boy never forgot that.
Yes. Yep.
He always says to me, "George, do you remember when I swam Craigie?" And it was a highlight of his life. And he got more out of that than if he'd have won that race, you know. And it's things like that make coaching, Bob.
Absolutely.
And you know that. And winning is fine, but there are some things besides that that are more important to me.
Absolutely.
I don't know about you, but I feel that way. What else you want to ask me?
What did coaching mean to you? You touched on before winning wasn't always the best thing. It was what was the greatest thing you can draw from coaching? The profession.
Working with kids.
Yeah.
And seeing them win was it. I mean, you always go in and meet, you know, trying to win, but see them light up when they win a race. And not only that, but it's the attitude that they took if they lost. They accepted it, Bob, and that made more to me than anything. Because as long as they were satisfied and happy, I was happy.
You know, that's what coaching's all about. It's all about being with the kids. It's all about seeing them go from point A to point B, seeing them grow.
Improving.
Yeah.
Now, whatever you want to ask me, if I can answer it.
This is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. This is perfect. This has been, for me, an honor to be here talking to you.
You'll never know how much I appreciate you coming up.
I just want to thank you for your time. This was incredible.